Kia ora tātou, good afternoon and welcome to everyone to this meeting of the Dunedin City Council. Welcome to councillors, to staff, media and to the Waikouaiti Polytech journalism students. Welcome. We are without a prayer today, so we will carry on regardless. We have apologies from Councillor Vandervis and apologies for lateness from Councillor Hudson and Councillor Noon. I'll move that the apologies be accepted. Second, Councillor Staines. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Against? Carried. Item 2, confirmation of the agenda. I'll move from the Chair that the agenda as published be confirmed. Second, to Councillor Staines. Discussion. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Against? Carried. Oh yes, and retrospectively, you would note the withdrawal of item 29, which is no longer on our agenda. Item 3, declaration of interest. That's for members reminding. We don't need to action that. Item 4, and I'll move from the Chair that the public part of the minutes of the meeting of the Dunedin City Council held on the 20th of May 2013 be confirmed as a correct record. Second, Councillor Staines. Any discussion? Put it. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Against? Carried. Item 5, hearings committees. Now, this is the 5A, B and C were all to be moved by Councillor Noon.
I'll do so, sir.
Councillor Wetherall.
Yep. Sir, I'll move that the hearing meeting notice item 5A and 5A be taken as read.
Second to Councillor Wilson. Any discussion on that? I'll put it. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Against? Carried.
Thank you, sir. 4B, the minutes of the hearing committee held on the 8th of April 2013 be noted.
Second to Councillor Wilson. Any discussion? All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Against? Carried.
Thank you, sir. 5C, liquor licence, the minutes of the hearing committee held on the 19th of April 2013 be noted.
Second to Councillor Wilson. Discussion? I'll put it. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Against? Carried. Right, on to item 6, Community Development Committee. Oh, that meeting was cancelled. So we move on to item 7, Infrastructure Services Committee. Councillor Wilson.
I'll move that the Part A items 1 to 4 and 8 of the minutes of the Infrastructure Services Committee meeting held on the 11th of June 2013 be noted.
Second to Councillor McTavish. Discussion? Put it. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Against? Carried.
Further move that the following Part B items as noted, on the items of the minutes of the Infrastructure Services Committee meeting held on the 11th of June 2013 be approved as noted.
Second, sir.
Thank you, Councillor. Second to Councillor McTavish. No discussion. I'll put it. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Against? Carried.
Sir,
Councillor Wetherall.
if I have leave, sir, I think it's the appropriate stage under infrastructure services to make comment to the council. So in the last week or 10 days, particularly our staff, led by our CEO and many of our other staff, have made Herculean efforts to support the services and delivery to our people in the city, and I think it's important that the council acknowledges and notes that, sir. And I'm not one for wanting to nominate particular staff, but it would appear without doubt that Peter Stingham, one of our engineers, not only has he inherited the frontline position for the seawall, which is one hell of a challenge, but he has taken the responsibilities public-wise for many of the other activities in the last 10 days, and I certainly just like to acknowledge that effort of our staff through the CEO, to all people and all staff across all levels. Thank you.
Councillor Wetherall, would you like to move that council note our appreciation of the efforts of staff in the past week and those
Thank you for your suggestion, sir. I so do.
Seconded Councillor Wilson.
Yes, could we extend that to some of the certainly the roading contractors who have been fabulous as well?
All those who have contributed. Any discussion on that? I'll put it. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Against? Carried. Thank you, Councillor Wetherall. Item 8, Planning and Environment Committee. Councillor Wilson.
I'll move that the Part A items 1 to 5 and 7 of the minutes of the Planning and Environment Committee meeting held on the 11th of June 2013 be noted.
Second to Councillor Stevenson. Discussion? I'll put it. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Against? Carried.
And I further move that the following Part B item of the minutes of the Planning and Environment meeting held on the 11th of June 2013 be approved, and that's the submission on the Housing Accords and Special Housings Areas Bill.
Second to Councillor Stevenson. Discussion. Councillor Collins.
Yes, I wonder if I could indulge your worship, just to make a quick comment. Probably should have done it at Infrastructure Services. There's been a lot of damage done around the city with the weather over the past week, and I understand that in a couple of centres north of Dunedin, obviously, some of the trees have been carted away and sawn up and taken to the tip, or dumped anyway. And I don't know what we plan to do with trees and things that have fallen down the Portobello and different places, but rather than...
Councillor Collins, can I interrupt you here to open discussion on this item? I'll come back to you, because what you're speaking about is not relevant to the
I realise that.
motion on the... and I'll complete that and then come back to you if that's fine with you. Any further discussion on the motion as moved? Right, I'll put it. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Against? Carried. Councillor Collins.
Sorry. Well, really, just to finish off, if that is scheduled to happen, could I ask that we rethink that? And there'll be a lot of firewood there for people who are hard up and going to have perhaps a cold winter, and we could make some provision in that respect rather than just lose our timber. That's all.
Well, I think staff can note that, and we will look at opportunities in that direction. Thank you. Item 9, Finance, Strategy and Development. Councillor Brown. Oh, that was cancelled as well. So, right there. Minutes of the Community Boards. Item 10, Waikouaiti Coast. Councillor Wilson.
I'll move that the minutes of the meeting of the Waikouaiti Coast Community Board held on the 29th of May 2013 be noted.
Second to Councillor Weatherall. Any discussion? I'll put it. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Against? Carried. Item 11, Otago Peninsula. Councillor McTash.
Your Worship, I move that the minutes of the meeting of the Otago Peninsula Community Board held on 30th of May 2013 be noted.
Second to Councillor Wilson. Any discussion? I'll put it. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Against? Carried. Item 12, Strathtyra. Councillor Wilson.
I'll move that the minutes of the meeting of the Strathtyra Community Board held on the 30th of May 2013 be noted.
Second to Councillor McTavish. Any discussion? I'll put it. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Against? Carried. Item 13, Mosgiel-Tyre. Councillor Brown.
Worship, I move that the minutes of the meeting of the Mosgiel-Tyre Community Board held on the 4th of June be noted.
Second to Councillor Wilson. Discussion? All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Against? Carried.
And I'll further move item 14 on behalf of Councillor Noon, that the minutes of the Chalmers Community Board held on the 5th of June be noted.
Councillor Wilson, seconding.
Secondly, that's her, but I'd also like to take time to acknowledge the reason that Councillor Hudson and Noon aren't here today, and acknowledge the good works of Ian Church, who's passed away, and they're attending his funeral. He'd been a member of this community board for a number of years, and his contribution to the Greater Chalmers community should be noted.
Probably noted.
And acknowledged.
Thank you. Any further comments, discussion? I'll put it. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Against? Carried. Item 15, Saddle Hill. Councillor Whittle.
Thank you, sir. I move the minutes of the Saddle Hill Community Board meeting held on 6th of June 2013 be noted.
Second to Councillor McTavish. Discussion? I'll put it. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Against? Carried. Right, we're on to reports. Item 16, and I will move from the chair that the minutes of the council meeting, annual plans, hearings and deliberations held on the 6th to the 7th, the 13th to the 15th of May 2013, amended as follows: that it be agreed that the grant to the St Kilda Library be increased by 500 to 15,500 to be funded from existing budgets, be confirmed as correct record. Now, perhaps should have held off until we had time for questions, but nonetheless, I moved. Second to Councillor Staines, and then I'll open it up for questions. And I think there are 3 additional recommendations as well. The 3 additional recommendations that go.
I think it's 2 separate think it might be two separate agenda items, Your Worship. The minutes, moving the minutes, which you've just done, and then the actual report on the changes.
It's possible I might put that note in the wrong place on my agenda. Anyway, that's the case, is it? Separate. Right. Okay. We'll open it up for questions. Councillor Wilson.
Mine isn't a question, Your Worship. That's just on page 28, in the second lot of discussion under fluoridation, and this is more to give the staff a sense of feeling they can achieve their target. I think during the discussion, and I've checked with Councillor Weatherall, we thought that the level of fluoridation in the water supply be implemented at a target at a maximum of 0.75 micrograms per litre. It just gives more flexibility, and I didn't think it was a perfect science.
Thank you. Noted. Councillor Thompson.
No, sorry, my question's later.
Councillor Stevens.
I'm looking on page 23 of the minutes, and it's moved by at the top of page 23, it's moved by the Mayor Hudson that Council requests staff to provide initial discussions on options for consideration of alternative means to progress the South Dunedin. I thought it was library when it was moved, but it says community complex. When we did this, I can't remember any submissions to say the library shouldn't go ahead. And I just would like to have some confirmation that a community complex doesn't mean not doing a library, because I wouldn't like to be because it's a new term. So I'd like some definition of what this term could or couldn't include. I understood it was just a broadening, but not an exclusion of a library.
So there has been discussions in the community for some time that the South Dunedin library area is likely to be a wider group of facilities than just a library. So although the term library has hung on from earlier years, and more recently the discussions has been of a multi-use complex, so it certainly does still include a library.
So can I just add to that, because when I read the comments that will go back to the public, it could be perceived that a community complex is not a library, and I'm wondering, as an editorial matter, if it could be clarified that it's a complex including a library.
Yep, we'll do that.
Thank you.
Further points? There being none, I will put the motion, and that is 16A. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Against? Carried. Now on to 16B, and I take it that the additional 3 recommendations refer to adding to the recommendations on 16.2 in our agenda. So would you like to...
Just briefly, there are 3 things that have come up since the draft budget was discussed. The first is anticipation of reduced income from parking as a result of the decision that you made on the 20th of May around the one-way system and the parking changes in order to make that safer. So we've adjusted the budget to allow for that. There's also some changes with the rating system as a result of the referendum on the Rockland Rural Water Scheme that you're aware of. And in addition, when the item of the Dunedin Gasworks Museum Trust was put up, there was an initial proposal and discussion around 2 or 3 years, and Manager of Property has come back and said that 2 years is in fact difficult. It kicks in a part of a year, and in order to make it fiscally affordable, a 3-year budget was necessary that was discussed. And so in the absence of having a council meeting between then and now, we've put that in on asking you to retrospectively agree to that change.
Are there any further questions? Councillor Thompson.
Look, I understand it's a conservative way to deal with it. But I was just, I suppose, quizzical around the reduction in parking revenue. Does it naturally follow that if we remove those parks, we reduce the revenue accordingly? I would have thought that possibly it just shifted where people parked.
It depends on whether we manage to put in parks elsewhere in order to recoup that revenue. So at this point in time, we are erring on the side of caution. Potentially some of that may be gained back, but some may not.
Okay, any further? Councillor Stevenson.
I was going to raise some issues, but I think they probably belong in 3 because they're more either questions or editorial. So they're just smaller items. I've sent an email through. So I think they're best to be raised in 3 as questions.
Well, given that part of the recommendations, number 3, as you say, quite rightly, item 3 allows Chief Executive in consultation with me to make minor editorial changes, I think it would be appropriate for you to forward them to us and we will take them on board if they're appropriate.
Separately?
I don't think we need a resolution to that effect because we've already got it. You happy with that?
Yes. There was one probably that might need to be discussed, but...
Well, you need to determine whether you think it's of sufficient import for you to want to raise it here. I can't tell you that.
Okay, so you're moving just 1 or 1, 2, 3?
Nothing's been moved yet. I'm just pointing out that editorial changes of a minor nature are taken account of in the recommendations which will form part of the motion at the time. If there is something of some moment that you feel you need to raise that wouldn't be of the nature of a minor editorial change, then you need to raise it.
And if it's of any assistance, Councillor Stevenson, the issues that you raised with regard to specific content of the letters and wanting them to be clear, we will be making all of those changes.
Okay, well, with that, I'm quite happy, sir.
Thank you. Okay, Councillor Butcher.
Sue, I need to withdraw from 1C, so if you wouldn't mind taking them all separately so I can do that.
Sure, that is not a problem. Okay, Councillor McTavish.
Well, Your Worship, I just wondered, I think it's appropriate that the Mayor and Deputy move and second, so I imagine that that's going to be the case, but I just wondered whether or not we would be able to add a 4, and that is to acknowledge the work of the Chief Executive and all staff in preparing this document. I think we did it during the draft, but I know that there's an enormous amount of work that has subsequently gone into the bridge since then, so I wonder whether it would be appropriate to do that.
Yes, I think it would be very appropriate. Do you have some words that you could convey?
Sure.
I think it's pretty brief that Council notes with appreciation the work of the Chief Executive and staff in
finalising
things. That fine? Okay. Any further discussion? Okay. Well, I'm going to move from the chair the recommendations on page 16.2 with the addition of the 4th as suggested by Councillor McTavish, seconded Councillor Staines. Open for discussion on that. There being none, I'll put it. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Against? Carried. Okay. Item 17, setting of the rates for the 2013-14 financial year. And I think we'll start with Caroline. So, 17. Any questions on this, councillors?
I think
Councillor Brown.
Yes,
Caroline's got
question.
Your Worship, I have got an amendment, if that's all right.
Can I come back to you, Councillor Brown?
Yeah, on page 17.2, under C, the curbside recycling rate, I would like to add the words that receive the service to each of those 2 bullet points, just so that it's clear that you only pay that rate if you're receiving the service.
Is everyone clear about that? Okay. Anything else you'd like to add?
No, that's all.
Councillor Brown.
I'm just happy to move the recommendations with that amendment.
Okay, so seconded. Councillor Wilson. Discussion. Councillor Stevenson.
I'm going to abstain for voting if I can, sir, due to conflict of interest reasons.
Now, I'm just conscious. Can I go back as a matter of process? I'm just conscious that I ignored Councillor Butcher's request for item 3 to be, item 1C to be taken separately, and I would like to go back and, well, are you happy for me to note?
I've already sorted it out with Pam, sir.
Yeah. Thank you. I'm My apologies for that, Councillor Butcher. Yeah. Thank you. Okay. So any further discussion? Councillor Wilson.
I appreciate I seconded it, but I've just got, going back to 17.2 and that C item, and I'm not quite sure that it quite reads correctly yet. $64 including GST per rating unit for all rating units in the non-residential and non-residential Strathari. So that's all non-residential throughout the city. Okay, and at the end of the Strathari one. So thank you. I just wanted to clarify that. Thank you.
Okay, Councillor, any further? Just get Councillor Ackland.
Is it too late for a question? I know we're in discussion.
No, fine.
I just want to, I assume this is the right place to ask this question. The overall rates increase of 4%, just wondering if there's any comment in relation to how that actually impacts on various properties. I recall when we had our workshop about a year ago that the impact from the last rate increase showed a huge discrepancy between one property to another. I was just wondering if Karen perhaps makes some sort of comment as to what people could expect by way of this 4%. We're calling it a 4% blanket, but obviously it doesn't quite work that way in reality. And I was just wondering what sort of extremes there might be by way of somebody's rates are really only going up 2%, somebody else might be going up 6%. And I think last time the average rate increase was actually less for, I think, most than what was reported. But it meant, of course, there were extremes on either end elsewhere.
Yes, Your Worship. In your draft plan, there is, we do provide a sample list on page 236 and 237. So it does vary depending on the category of property you're in, because a large part of the increase is the drainage rate because of the completion of the Tahuna treatment plant. So for example, a farmland, an average farmland property, the increase is 2.3% as opposed to 4%. The average value residential property, the increase is 3.5%. So there are variations depending on value and on services that are provided.
Any further discussion? Councillor Brown, would you like to exercise your role?
No, the only point that I would like to point out, so that the ratepayers are aware, that in a tight fiscal period, you know, the council, in conjunction with the chief executive, has addressed the financial strains of the city in a way that it looks like we've held our rates to 4%. Within that, there is a fiscal opportunity now that our debt repayment on the stadium is reduced, and that is $2 million per year, and that's within that 4% amount that the rates are going up. So if you take that out of the equation, we've actually got a general rate increase of around 2%, but we're repaying debt, and that repayment of debt brings it up to the 4%. So I think it's a sterling effort by the chief executive and the staff, and I think the city's been well served by the advice that it's had and the outcome that's now going to be delivered.
Thank you. I'm going to put it. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Against? Carried. Okay, moving on to item 18, security for borrowings. Just would like to practice this to any remarks, Carolyn, or just take questions?
I'm just happy to take questions, Your Worship.
Any questions of Carolyn on this?
I'm happy to move 1, 2 and 3.
Moved Councillor Brown, seconded Councillor Staines. Discussion? There being none, would you like to speak to this at all, Councillor Brown?
I think it's just a standard procedure that we have every year, which gives the security for the borrowings to council.
Thank you. I'm going to put it. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Against? Carried. Okay, on to item 19, statements of intent. of DCHL Group of Companies. Ms. Grant, welcome. Welcome, Kathy. So Kathy Grant's here from the board of DCHL. I'll open it up to questions in the first instance. Councillor Thompson.
On page 19.6, I did ask this question when the draft statement of intent was presented to us, I think in closed session a couple of months ago. But I think in the interest of transparency, the question needs to be asked in an open session as well, and it relates to the apparent continued diminution, if that's the correct word, of the shareholders' funds and the shareholders' funds to total assets, which are projected to reduce from 8.2% in 13-14 to 5.3% in 15-16. And I recall that when I asked the question in the previous, when they were previously presented to us, that as I recall, the reply was along the lines of, well, we actually expect to do better than the projections in the out years, and so we are not expecting that there will be a further reduction in the shareholder equity. But it ought to be a concern of this council that if that is the expectation, that it's not reflected in the statement of intent out years. So my question is it the board's view that that DCHL will show a continued reduction in its shareholders' funds? And if it is, what concerns does it have with regard to that? And thirdly, does that have an impact, or is that likely to have an impact for the projected dividends to council in those out years?
Councillor Thompson? Is that more appropriate? Those matters are clearly of concern to DCHL, and in the first instance, the most certainty is clearly in relation to years 1 rather than in years 2 and 3. So there is always risk associated with the operation of the subsidiary companies, and that is simply the reality of the situation. Those are matters of concern. DCHL is taking those matters on board, and you will be aware of some of the thinking and strategies that DCHL is presently working on, and which in due course will come to the council for consideration. At this point, there is nothing to suggest that diminution will impact on the payments which DCHL has committed to make to the council.
Councillor Thompson.
But if that is the case, and my boy's own book of accounting could easily be letting me down here, but the only way that I could see that it could continue to meet the dividends as projected and end up with a reduction in the shareholder equity is if it was borrowing to make those dividends, or it was selling capital assets to make those dividends, either of which would, I think, be a significant concern to council, given the undertakings that dividends would not be funded out of either borrowing or, I guess by definition, selling assets to fund them. So that's where my concern lies.
There is perhaps another explanation, Councillor Thompson, and that is that the subsidiaries perform better than budgeted.
Yeah, okay, well, but that's not what's being projected here. In terms of how are you suggesting that the dividend payments might be greater from subsidiaries and going direct to council?
My comments really are, in any detail, confined to years 1. Years 2 and 3, in my view, are predictions and projections, but, cannot be treated with any certainty because of the risk associated with changes in trading activities.
Any further questions? Councillor McTavish.
Well, I have just a couple of questions. I guess the first follows on from Councillor Thompson's question, and that is we would expect then some fairly robust discussions over the next few months as we move through our budget procedures in relation to the next annual plan, given that we'd want to ensure that the dividend that is projected is going to match up with as closely as possible with what we're expecting to receive.
Yes, that sounds all very sensible.
I guess the second question is similar. On page 19A4, 4.12, the discussion around the need to engage with the shareholder on an annual basis around opportunities for the company and its subsidiaries to contribute to or assist where possible the council's community outcomes. I know on Wednesday, for example, we will be launching the first stage of our energy plan, and there may be a role there for some of the companies to contribute. Is there a formalised meeting or mechanism for this engagement to take place, or is that an opportunity that we should be formalising in order to ensure that those opportunities are highlighted as clearly as possible?
I'm unaware, Councillor McTavish, of a process or procedure for that engagement to occur on the part of DCHL.
Would it, in your view, be a useful thing to formalise? I mean, I'm sure that the board members, we are in an ongoing dialogue all the time, but in your view, would it, or perhaps in the board's view, perhaps this is something that we could consider? It might be a formalisation of that process, just to ensure that everyone is on the same page.
I'm sure that could appropriately be scheduled into our engagement, certainly.
Chief Executive.
His Worship and I meet with the DCHL board regularly, so I think what we would be looking to achieve in terms of the new triennium is an early meeting with the DCHL board when we look at our financial planning, particularly for the 14-15 year, and we can look at it in that context if there are any wider tie-ups between DCHL subsidiary companies and the council.
Further questions? Councillor Brown.
It's just a question looking forward, and I was just wondering if you could take this back to the board, Kathy. Looking at the budget process and the timelines that we've got, we're reasonably tight in getting information that is factual and that we can use in the annual plan process. And because the balance states and the auditing and everything of your company's accounts and the requirement of the city under the statutes of local government, the timelines are reasonably tight. And I'm just wondering if you could give some thought as to getting a process that's more aligned to meeting council's requirements and setting its annual plan.
It would be helpful, perhaps, Councillor Brown, if you could elaborate what sort of timeframes do you have?
Happy to do that.
Yeah, that would be helpful.
Any further discussion or questions?
No, I just wanted, after it's moved, can I make a general comment?
Sorry?
After the item's moved, can I make a general comment, please?
After the item's moved, it'll be up for discussion, as is the case when we move anything. So I'm going to move from the chair that the statements of intent A to G, those being the DCHL group company statements of intent, be approved.
Sorry, hang on. I thought we were taking them one by one, so the question I asked pertained to DCHL. Are you
These are the DCHL group company. You mean you only applied to A?
Yes.
Okay. Well, why don't I throw it open to questions on any from A to G, because they're all statements of intent, which I understand haven't changed since February. So unless you want to take them separately.
If you're taking DVML and DVL separately, then that's fine.
I'm taking DCHL first, then DVL and DVML, and then Tourism Dunedin.
That's fine.
That's right. So the statements of intent that I'm moving for approval are 19A to G. And do I have seconders? Seconded Councillor Staines. Any further discussion? Councillor Stevens.
I think this is, it's very good, it's very clear what we have here, which I really appreciate. I suppose my favourite bit in this is on 6.7, which is non-financial, about being a good corporate citizen. And then, at the back, and it appears in each of them, in 17, the use of Otago manufactured goods and services. And I'd just like to congratulate the holding company and all the subsidiaries for making this effort to be a good corporate citizen and to buy Otago products. And I hope that they can really show to us within a short time frame that they actually achieve this. And even to stretch themselves a little bit further, because there's social services in Dunedin, in Otago, that employ people who have find it more difficult to enter employment, such as willing workers or Workers' Opportunity Trust, and numerous other cargo enterprises. There's a lot of social agencies out there. These are Otago people offering services, offering products, and also helping the more marginalised into the workforce. And I reckon that a little bit of openness to those services will do the city great. So I'd like to thank the company and all the subsidiaries for considering using our products and helping the people that are less advantaged in our community if everything stacks up all equitably.
Thank you. Councillor Thompson.
Well, look, it's really obviously to follow up on my earlier questions. I do have a real concern that when you're projecting an operating surplus after income tax in the 2015 year of 1.5 mil and the 2016 year of 2.3 mil, you can't pay a dividend of 4.3 mil without either having to borrow or having to sell something. And you could do that if you have a significant depreciation component, but my understanding is that within DCHL that's not the case. The depreciation really is occurring in the subsidiaries. And I do appreciate the difficulty of forecasting in out years. It's a difficult science, and the tendency is to, if you're smart, is to under forecast and over deliver rather than the other way around. But I think we need to have considerable caution around what the potential impact might be, because I don't believe that DCHL can live down in the 5% proprietor equity. It's not a bank. It's, and it basically means that any future development becomes very, very difficult to fund on that level of proprietor equity. Lenders get nervous, and so I think to the extent that the directors are standing by those out-year projections, then we need to have a pretty urgent discussion around what the implications of that are for the out-year dividends. To the extent that they may be being unduly cautious in presenting them, then I don't know that it's helpful in this context. It may be sensible to do it when you have a group of shareholders who may or may not get a dividend, in the general sense of a commercial company, but where you have a single shareholder who is quite heavily dependent in terms of its planning, and in a way that's very bound by legislation. It puts us in a very difficult situation to be looking at these figures, but on the same hand looking at the promised dividend structure. So I do emphasise my concern that this needs to be dealt with by discussion, and if that discussion says we're quite confident of paying the dividends, then my view is that the out years should reflect that, because we're sending an incompatible message.
Further discussion? Yeah, being none, I'll put it. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Against? Carried. Thank you. Now on to item 20. Statements of intent for DVL and DVML. There's no one here. Carol, you're going to address any questions. So in the first instance, I'll invite questions to Carolyn. You've got something to...
Yes, Your Worship. I've put a replacement page or a replacement section from the DVL statement of intent. Page 20.4 gives financial projections. The EBIT numbers, which is earnings before interest, tax and depreciation, included interest in the version that you got, so that's been corrected on the piece of paper that I've left on everybody's table.
Right. Questions, councillors? There have been no questions? Okay. I'll move to the chair that the statements of intent of DVL and DVML, well actually no, DVL, because it's a separate item, be approved. Seconded. Seconded, Councillor Brown. Any discussion? Councillor Thompson.
So with regard to DVL primarily, one of the difficulties in these statements of intent is that the financial information as it's provided is actually almost impossible for anyone to divine anything from, because it's so brief. And with respect, if it hadn't been for the footnote on the depreciation change, I don't think anyone would have picked up this table was wrong. And I really think that given the amount of controversy there has been, and there still is around this, that it would actually be advantageous for a document like this to include a full budget for DVL. I don't see that there's any commercial concern around it, and it would help to remove some of the misunderstanding that occurs as a result of the interaction between the two entities. So people see in the paper that, you know, DVL is making a loss, and they assume that that's the operating company, and it just gets really messy in it. So is there any reason why that can't be done? And even if it was broken down into, it doesn't have to be the full level of detail. It's probably too late now in terms of this, but in future at least.
No reason why it can't be done, and we will convey that to the board.
Further questions? Councillor Wilson.
Well, just taking that forward, because I don't want to leave the board with the option of saying no, but I'm just wondering what is best practiced in these situations. I mean, appreciating that not all companies are set up the same way, but would it be best practice so that we're best informed and the community is best informed to know that? Yeah.
I think we agree with what Councillor Thompson is saying. It would represent a significant improvement on what we've got here, so we'll convey a clear message to the board.
Thank you.
Further discussion? All right. Councillor Stevens.
Again, with this company, you'll still see the social and environmental, the good corporate citizen component, and the Buy Otago component also through there. And I just really look forward to the venue being able to show us that this is how they act as a good corporate citizen, and how they employ and utilise local goods and services, including those from social agencies. And I'm actually looking really forward to them being able to report to us concrete ways that they achieve these particular items. Thank you.
You're aware that we are speaking about DVL here?
Yeah, I get confused.
Okay. I'm going to put it. This is item 20. I move that the statement of intent be for DVL be approved. Seconded, Councillor Staines. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Against? Carried. On to item 21, which is DVML, Dunedin Venues Management Limited. Any questions? Right. I'll move from the chair that the statement of intent of Dunedin Venues Management Limited be approved. Seconded, Councillor Staines.
And my comments actually belonged here.
I surmised as much, thank you. Any further discussion? I'll put it. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Against? Carried. Thank you, Caroline. Right, we're on to item 22, the statement of intent of Tourism Dunedin. And I think, Sophie, I thought you were here somewhere. Welcome. And Dr. Goodrose. I'll open it up for questions in the first instance, councillors, if you have any questions of Sophie and Dr. Goodrose. Councillor Tash.
My question, Your Worship, just pertains to the steering group that has been established. My query is whether it has met for the first time yet, and whether we have any indication how long its process might take.
No, it hasn't met yet. We're just concluding the membership and the terms of reference. We hope to clarify the terms of reference in the next few weeks, and then we'll get a meeting together as soon as possible. In terms of length of time for the process, we'll try to keep it as short as possible. Certainly we need to determine the position prior to the discussion of the next annual plan.
Thank you.
Councillor Stevens.
Yeah, thank you. I was looking at the key changes to the statement of corporate intent, and so if I ask them as questions and if they can be incorporated in some way into it. It talks about digital, about
Are you asking questions or are you wanting
questions?
Questions.
Yeah. Because I think they'll be addressed as questions. The first one is digital, and that involves growing the website. But I was wondering about linking into other websites, that interaction with other websites, including our own within DCC. So it speaks very much here of their own website, but I was wondering about linking in digitally with other websites, including the DCCs, and if that couldn't be incorporated, or is that considered to be involved in another point? And I have two others.
I thank you, Councillor Stevenson. That will be integrated, and there's also number 8, which is putting the iSight's online presence, which is part of the DCC website as well, so it will be done.
Right, oh, that's good. And I had two other questions. One of them is that a number of venues in Dunedin, tourism venues, have sort of a Dunedin host arrangement which gives free access to Dunedin people to the facilities on the condition that they bring in visitors, and that's a great initiative for everybody involved. And I was just wondering if the development, the promotion of that, both in the private sector and DCC providers, couldn't be incorporated. And then I have one other.
Councillor Stevenson, you're making a suggestion as to a change in the statement of intent, but you're
I actually think it's probably part of it.
If I can finish. But you're actually ostensibly framing it as a question.
Yes.
Now, can I suggest that it is not possible for Ms. Barker to give a meaningful answer to that, since she is not Tourism Dunedin, and I suggest that it would be better to raise that in the discussion. But it probably would have been better yet to have raised beforehand, because then it could be changed, because clearly it can't be now.
My point is that I believe that it's actually inside the body of the document already, but it's a bit difficult to see it. That's why I asked the question. Is that relationship built, that promotion of within the body?
We'll pass that on to Tourism Dunedin.
And you had a third
Yeah, the third one is looking at the visitor industry, the jobs that are created within the visitor industry, and does that job belong to the DCC, the understanding of the industry, or does it belong to Tourism Dunedin, or do they work together to understand the jobs from the hospitality industry?
Are you talking about the Bill report?
Yes, yes. The jobs in accommodation, food and whatnot.
Councillor Stevenson, I'm struggling to understand the relevance of your question to the statement of intent.
I just wanted to know if it's part of the job of the DCC or of this group, that's all.
No, I'm asking you what the relevance of your question is to the statement of intent. Statements of intent are quite clear, and this is a statement of intent for Tourism Dunedin, not the DCC.
Yes.
And I think it's unreasonable to ask of our staff a question that relates to something entirely different. And bring it up at the right time, but I don't think this is it. Okay. You any comment on that, Sophie? But I don't think it's...
that comes through the Bill report, which is spread across all of the hospitality sector. And it's the responsibility, I guess, of all of us to fund these jobs.
That's what I would expect. Thank you.
Yeah, but it's irrelevant to what we've got in front of us. That's my point. Right, I'm going to move. If there's any further discussion, any further questions, sorry. I'm going to move from the chair that the statement of intent of Tourism Dunedin be adopted. Seconded Councillor Staines. Discussion. There being none, I'll put it. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Against? Carried. Thanks, Sophie. Sue? Right, on to item 23. Professor Hayward, if you'd like to join us up here with our governance officer, thank you. Right, Janine. Now, this item, councillors, is election issues 2013. You have the report in front of you. Professor Hayward has kindly offered to come in and answer any questions for clarity around the research on this issue. So in the first instance, I would indicate that I will move at the appropriate time, but in the first instance, I would invite questions of councillors of both Professor Hayward and Ms Graham in this regard. So any questions? Councillor McTavish.
Do we have any indication as to the number of TLAs which are now using a random order type approach? Or,
Pam may help as well.
Yeah, there are a few, but I'm sorry, I can't tell you.
That's fine.
Yeah. The DHB has recently resolved to do random order again, so we will actually have a random order on our voting documents anyway. So.
Further questions? Councillor Wilson.
Just confirmation of the cost variation for going random as opposed to alphabetical?
There's no additional cost for it.
It's on page 23.2.
Thank you. The question for Janine, just understanding STV as compared to other voting forms that procedures in the city, in the country. Does that have any bearing? I mean, STV or FPP won't have any difference?
It depends really on the number. It appears that it depends on the number in the list, more so necessarily than the voting system that you're using, if that makes sense. There does seem to be out Australia where voting is compulsory and you have to rank everybody, and that indicates that tends to increase the emphasis of the name order effect, as it's called.
So can I just ask, Janine, the effect is a name order effect, not an alphabetical effect. In other words, what I'm reading here is that the effect of an order favouring some candidates is those that are first in the line, regardless of how they are chosen, tend to be favoured over those in the body of the
That's right.
list.
So it's a name order effect as opposed to an alphabetical effect.
Yeah. Okay. Councillor Collins.
That's C for Collins. Just to confirm the booklet that goes out with the ballot papers, am I correct in assuming that that still goes out in alphabetical order regardless of any decision that's made here today?
Yes, that's correct.
And while I'm on my feet, if random voting is selected, is it once it is selected, or are there a number of randoms, in other words? Do you understand that?
Yeah, every voting document will be unique.
Every vote.
So the difference between, I think what you're asking, and I'll get Janine to clarify if I've got it wrong. If you randomised the names and said, just jumbled them up and then put them in a random order on a voting paper and made them all the same, voting papers, that's pseudo-random. Random is where they're jumbled up every time, so every voting paper is potentially different from the previous one. That's full random.
It is.
So it can't be with 43,000 voting papers.
There must be some mistakes.
Okay. Well, if you have enough people standing, it will be. If you have 30 people standing, I can almost guarantee you that. Just do the.
So, order. So, Councillor Collins, does that answer your question, or would you like?
Well, I think so. It means that if a voter gets his ballot papers, we're already into STV, so they work that out somehow, and they look at that voting. It's up to them to transfer, well, put that to one side, obviously, and then go back to a random list on a ballot paper if they wish to refer back to the voting book. That's correct. And has that been done before? Any problems or not?
Well, as I understand it, that is often what happens. The voter information stays in alphabetical order. The ballot paper itself is randomised.
Thank you. Further question, Councillor Brown.
Janine, can you throw any light on the studies that you've done? And it says here, including worldwide, that you mostly get a change of around 1 to 2.5%. Now, how do you actually then, when you arrive at that figure, assess the quality of the candidates? Because you get a candidate A in one region will be a really highly qualified candidate with a lot of credentials. Candidate A in another region may be someone that's first time to an election and has not built a CV or some credentials. So how do you factor that into the assessment that you've come up with?
So do you mean that one candidate at the top of the list might be well known anyway, as opposed to a candidate at the top of the list who's not?
Yes.
In terms of determining how much more of the vote they got by being at the top of the list. I can't answer that, but I think that that's part of the reason that there's so much debate around some of these studies, because you can't have the same election twice to see what the difference would be. So what they actually do is try and work out the probability that those people would have received that many votes anyway. I'm not sure if that actually helps you, but I guess what I'm saying is I don't think anyone can answer that for you definitively.
Thank you. Councillor Weatherall.
Thanks, sir. Two questions, ma'am. First is, you made comment, if I heard correctly, that when you get to a certain number of candidates, there's a threshold change. So in this city where we have 3 wards, 2 wards that are likely to have less than 10 candidates, likely, have no idea, but likely, and a central city ward that could have 30 plus. Is there a differential in your view or opinion based on those 2 components?
So a lot of the studies, I couldn't give you a magic number to say if you have fewer than this candidates, this is what happens. If you have more than that, that's what happens. What they tend to talk about is general characteristics of elections, and they know that the longer the list is that people are selecting from, and if you don't have parties and if you don't have high name recognition and a whole bunch of other things, that will increase the probability that you will have some sort of name order effect. But it is, I think it's important too to realise that it's The 1.5 to 2.5% figure is quite conservative. Some studies have had it up to about 6%. But that doesn't even necessarily mean that that's actually helped those people get elected, if that makes sense.
Right, the second question is that in the last election, correct me if I'm wrong, Councillor Thompson, DHB had random choice, random identification. Quite a significant number of candidates too. Last two elections. All the calls that I received, as I'm sure we all do, about election time, the one I got the most calls about is saying there are two of us in the home. We've got the DHB election voting form. I can't ask you about the council one, but I'm going to ask you about that. I can't find, and I'm going to use Councillor Thompson, because he's in a different position on the form. How does the publicity that works through that identify so people have a level playing field? That seems to be one of the random issues that come out of it, one of the issues about a random selection, particularly when there is a significant number of candidates.
Again, I'm not sure that I can answer that, but I can say that that's one of the reasons that that the name order effect occurs to the small degree that it does, in the sense that if people find it difficult to identify people on a ballot, that becomes kind of one thing, one threshold too many for them, and they will tend to concentrate on the top half of the ballot in their voting.
Sir, I need your tolerance when asked a returning officer a question which may help explain where I'm trying to come from. On the basis of 30 plus candidates for the Central Ward of the City, will they be on one front form, or were they on 1 and 2 pages? I think they're on 2 pages last time.
Yes, there are 2 columns on 1 page last time.
On 1 page?
Yeah, 1 page, 2 columns.
Yeah. What I was going to ask is there a bearing whether you're on page 1 or 2 that may affect the results as well?
Yeah.
Well, on 1 page, I understand, thank you.
That depends very much on how many candidates we actually get in the
end.
end.
33, if I stand corrected last time.
I think it was
39.
Everyone
Was on 1 page.
Yes, it was 1 page, 2 columns.
Thank you, thank you, sir.
Councillor Act.
Your Worship, has there been any study or survey as to what the voter prefers, alphabetical or random?
That's interesting.
Can I ask to repeat the question? Like what the
voter
prefers? I'm not sure that there's even been a study of what the candidates prefer. I suppose the point is the studies are of the effect that the way that the ballot paper's written translates into the way votes are received. So I couldn't say what voters would prefer. I certainly haven't seen any evidence about that.
Sorry, Your Worship. So out of all of the studies as to the effect that alphabetical or random has on the outcome, worldwide, as far as you know, there hasn't been any study or investigation as to what the voter actually finds easier to use or prefers to use.
I guess most of the studies are beginning with the assumption that because voters can sometimes find ballot papers cumbersome, that is why the name order effect occurs at all. But no, I'm not aware of any studies that have gone back to voters.
Councillor Stones.
Thank you, Your Worship. Just so that, to clarify in my mind, the science is clear. The question is the science clear that this effect does happen in an alphabetical paper, alphabetically listed, versus a randomly listed? So whether it be at the lower end, 1%, or at the higher end, maybe up to 6%, the effect is there.
So there's 2 things there. It does seem to be generally accepted that there is what they call a name order effect. That's not an alphabetical effect. So they basically say, if you produce a voting paper that looks the same for everybody, even if it's randomised, but it's still randomised the same way for everyone, you will find this name order effect occurs to a certain degree. So it is accepted that it happens. And it's also accepted that the only way that you can really overcome it is to completely randomise the ballots so people's don't look the same. I guess the debate is about the degree to which that effect occurs in different sorts of elections.
So it does have an effect.
Exactly. So there was
If
no...
name order has an effect
It does.
if you don't have a random paper.
Yes. Sadly, there's no study of an election that looks exactly like the Dunedin election, but you can kind of take some certain principles from others.
Councillor Thompson.
Sorry, Ginny, just before I said the last two elections, the DHB had been randomised, actually the last three. My question is, I looked at outcomes for DHB elections between randomised and non-randomised, and there was a very significant difference. But in the process of looking at that, I also looked at the research, and that research is, as you said, that most of the academic papers seem to estimate the impacts between about 1.5–4%. My question is, that same research also indicated that in Australia, that was estimated to affect the result in 10% of the federal seats. So my question is there a distinction that needs to be made between the size of the effect and the size of the impact of the effect?
Yes, absolutely. So you would need, if you're going to be able to predict to any appropriate degree how much of an effect it has in a particular election, you have to take the circumstances of that election into account. So the Australian examples that you give, there's a lot of debate about this in Australia, and that's mostly generated by the fact that in particular elections they are having to rank all candidates and voting is compulsory. So those are exactly the kinds of circumstances where you would expect to see this name order effect exaggerated most, because it's protest voting as well to a certain degree. So we don't have those circumstances here. You could predict that it's not having that effect.
Although the counterbalance to that is that in those federal elections you have largely party tickets.
Absolutely.
We know, don't we, that actually reduces that impact.
It does, although the study that they did of the Scottish local government elections last year showed that actually within the party ticket name order effect was really strong. So if a party listed more than one candidate, the first candidate overwhelmingly benefited from name order effect. So yes and no.
Okay. Part of the reason for my question about the difference between the size of the effect and its impact is in an STV election, you have people who drop off with relatively small differences between their votes. And what happens then is that their second, third or whatever preferences get reallocated. So my question is, in an STV election with a lot of candidates, you have potentially, do you not, small effects actually having proportionately larger impacts because the size of the difference in the vote when people drop off is actually quite small on each occasion.
I would need to think about it some more, but intuitively I would agree, because the point of STV is to reduce the number of wasted votes. Then obviously the percentage difference that name order effect has is likely to be more significant.
Councillor.
So I just wanted to clarify that what you really mean by the name order. If you think of the alphabetical list, is the suggestion here that it's the ones at the top part of the list that are better favoured?
Yes.
Whereas if you look at this council, there's 5 elected members from A to C and 6 from S to W. So further to that, is there an advantage being at the bottom of the list?
In fact, there is some evidence that yes, there is also some benefit to being, particularly if you're using the idea that the booklet's still in alphabetical order, that it is sometimes the case that the last names that you saw are also.
So if that's the case, then really going random probably helps out the people in the middle of the alphabet, then, perhaps.
I would need to think about that.
Or worst of all, could actually confuse the voter a lot more to the extent they can't find the person they're looking for once they've read the booklet.
Can I just make a clarification there? It's not the people in the middle of the alphabet that would be favoured. If it's a name order effect, it's the people in the middle of the ballot paper that are favoured. This is not about alphabetical, it's about the order of the name.
I appreciate that.
Yeah, so just putting out, it wouldn't be necessarily the people in the middle of the alphabet, it would be.
Well, they're the ones that are missing.
Yeah, but if it was Sudaran. Any further, Councillor Thompson, have you got another question?
Well, just again to further clarify, if it's a fully randomised ballot paper, there wouldn't be a candidate who was in the middle of the ballot paper, would there?
No, which is precisely the point. If you want to eliminate name order effect, it has to be completely randomised.
And look, my final question, are you aware of any evidence that changing ballot papers to random, or fully random, versus alphabetical, changes somebody's ability to look up a name in alphabetical order in the candidate booklet?
No, I'm not aware of evidence of that. If I could just add that, again, with the discussions that have been going on in Scotland, where they have made a recommendation to randomise their ballot paper for the next, I think it's in 2017 election, they use STV, and the issues of debate for them were around these points about people being able to identify easily enough their candidates in the ballot paper, and they did some fairly extensive research into that, and the experts that they called didn't raise any concerns about that. There were questions raised about the effect it might have on voters with low levels of literacy also, but there was no evidence they could find that would show that that would have an effect.
Councillor Butcher.
Jenny, I'm not sure if this is for you or maybe for Pam, but I'll throw it out there anyway. What guarantee do you think we'll have if we go random, fully random, with every voting form having a completely different listing, that the processing on the night will be prompt rather than having it pan over a few days and going back to that awful thing that we had in 2004, I think, was it Pam? 6, not sure if it's you or Pam.
It won't have any difference whatsoever. The results for the last 2 elections have been out by about 7:30 or something rather on election day, haven't they? And randomising the voting documents makes no difference to how they capture the information.
Councillor Ackland, do you have another question?
No, I'm just happy to move something when you're ready.
Well, I've indicated that I'm going to move, I indicated at the beginning, so if there are no further questions. Did you want another? So as I said, I indicated that I would move, and I'm going to move the recommendations 1 and 2C, surprisingly. And in speaking to that, I need to second it. Councillor Thompson. Second, Councillor Thompson. In speaking to that, I'd have to acknowledge that for some time I have felt that the full randomised version was the preferable one, on the basis that it was the only method that I could see that didn't favour or disadvantage, or could not favour or disadvantage any candidate. But what was lacking, at least in my research up till now, was the evidence, and we've had the evidence presented to us that there's a definite name order effect, regardless of whether you list alphabetically or any other way. If it's the same on every ballot paper, there's an effect. Now, it seems to me that it's this council or any council's responsibility to make decisions on the basis of facts and evidence. And to do so on any other basis would be simply saying, well, I feel a certain way, or worse than that, self-interest. So I don't believe that any of us can afford to ignore the facts. I also think it's council's responsibility, insofar as we are setting any of the rules and parameters for the election, to be as fair as possible to all the candidates who are standing. And if we decided, for instance, to list the candidates on the ballot paper with the incumbent councillors at the top, we would be seen as being extremely unfair. Equally, it's unfair to list any one group all at the top, regardless of how that is chosen. So it seems to me, as I said earlier, that the full random system is the only system of the three that cannot favour or disadvantage anyone. Now, I acknowledge there's been an argument around convenience and voters being able to find more easily find their favoured candidates. Now, even if I accept that that is a possibility, I can't accept that you can put convenience above fairness. If one system disadvantages some people, then you may have to sacrifice a bit of convenience. Nonetheless, the convenience or inconvenience is spread across all the candidates. So if it's difficult to find one, it's difficult to find them all. So if they're randomised, no one, again, is going to be disadvantaged. And I'd say that on a personal level, since my name is in the first three letters of the alphabet, that I couldn't in all conscience vote for the alphabetical system, having seen the evidence anyway. So I would have to conclude that if anyone were to vote for continuation of alphabetical listing, they would have to be flying in the face of the evidence, or putting perceived convenience above fairness, or possibly acting in self-interest, and I'll leave it to you and the community to decide whether that is a reasonable thing to do. Speakers. Councillor Ackland.
Thank you, Worship. In the main, I agree with you, and I was in fact going to move exactly the same thing that you did, because with my name being at the top of the list alphabetically, if there is a perceived view that there is an advantage there, I certainly wouldn't want to be elected because my name begins with A. The only, I suppose, difference is to what you have said is that I just hope that the voters don't come back and say that this is a stupid thing to do. Because I do recall with other groups having changed from alphabetical listing that there was dissatisfaction with some voters. And I accept, as I've already said, that there may well be a perceived advantage for somebody at the top of the list alphabetically. But the evidence that's come to us here, especially when you look at our council, to me, it's not really very conclusive, but I certainly support what you have moved.
Councillor Butcher.
I'll be supporting the recommendations, Your Honour. Personally, I would rather that, Your Worship, I would personally rather it was alphabetical, because I am one of those people that like to find it there where I think it's going to be, but that's just me. But I'm going to go with the evidence as well and go for the random.
Councillor Thompson.
Well, it won't come as any surprise that I support the recommendation, but to me this is about fairness, and I did circulate a paper to councillors that I did a number of years ago on the DHB elections, and without, I'm assuming of course that most people have read it, but if they haven't, just as an example, in boards that used alphabetical papers, 49% of candidates with surnames between A and D were elected. In boards that use randomised papers, 24% were elected. And that's just a huge difference. And you can look at it a number of ways and it all comes out the same way. So for me, it is about fairness. And if we look proudly at our electoral system in New Zealand and the lack of corruption and the lack of gerrymandering and all of that kind of thing. But you know, actually having a fair system for everybody is actually just as important as those other things. And the size of the impact may be relatively small, but the potential impact of that impact is quite a bit larger. So I do accept that when people are looking for someone's name on the ballot paper that they wish to vote for, they have to try a little harder. But I don't accept that it's hard for them to find information about the people on the ballot paper, even when they're out of any alphabetical order, because the booklet is still in alphabetical order and it's very easy to look that up. And if you have to try a little bit harder to vote well, that doesn't strike me as being a bad thing to have to do.
Councillor Stevenson.
Yes, well, so the last name is Stevenson. I do of course support random order and always have done. But even if I did change my last name to a different letter, say in the middle of the alphabet or even at the top, I would still support random order. This council has traditionally every time voted for alphabetical, and in my view alphabetical supports known councillors, so that always supports us. If you know your candidates, you're going to be able to find them a lot better, even under an alphabetical system. So it gives a disadvantage to the new people. So I definitely support. I think it avoids bias towards those at the top of the alphabet. It also avoids copying. If everybody's voting form looks exactly the same, what we do have is a lot of partners go, well, just vote for the same ones as I ticked, dear. I think that's really important to avoid that, and people should be filling out their own forms themselves and avoid copying. So it makes them go through a mental process, their form will be different. And it, most importantly, avoids the use of name recognition. It gives new candidates a good chance of being spotted in there, and it isn't always about just who you can recognise their names of. With 33 candidates or more, this is one of the issues of a large voting system. You have an awful lot of names to sit down and to study. I think it's hard. I think that there is a benefit of breaking it into smaller neighbourhoods so that we can make sure that we get to know our candidates and that our candidates have a chance of showing who they are to their community. It also makes sure that everybody doesn't live in Waverley, which is another bias that can occur. And in fact, if you look at previous DHB elections, the other thing to notice is the number of people that live in the more well-to-do neighbourhoods. A bias does occur there too. But I think changing the ward system back to a smaller system is another issue again, but I think this at least starts the journey towards a more fairer system.
Thank you. Councillor Weatherall.
Thank you, sir. I support the resolutions as set out. I just need your confirmation, sir, that it applies to all and every voting paper within the Dunedin City Council elections. Community boards, the whole lot. Small wards, large wards, it applies right across the mass.
Yes.
Thank you, sir.
Councillor Mazet.
Yes, thank you, Your Worship. Given that my name starts with B, I think I better stand and declare that I agree with your comments you made earlier on. It is about fairness, no question about this. We've voted for alphabetical order in this council for a number of years, and that was because we all thought that there was no advantage to any of those candidates. But if the science and the maths are correct, that appears to be the case, that there is an advantage, and no one sitting around this table would want that anyway. If the science and the maths are wrong, it doesn't really matter. As far as the inconvenience of the random system, and make no bones about it, the random system will, in fact, every voting paper, you'd only have to get maybe 25 candidates, and every voting paper will be different, no question. You know, the voters have coped with STV and wards and a number of other different methodologies over the years, and I have no doubt that they'll cope with us in as well, so I'll certainly be supporting them.
Councillor McTavish.
Thank you, Your Worship. I'll be supporting this motion wholeheartedly. I think the council took a step a few years ago of introducing STV for the reasons that it was perceived to be a more equitable system, and I think it has played out to be that. And I think that this is another step in making the manner in which we conduct elections in the city more equitable and actually a more robust process. And the only thing, I've endorsed most of what's been said around the table, the only thing that I feel hasn't been addressed that I'd like to highlight is that it is incredibly important that people have trust in the voting system. It's the means by which we operate as a democracy, and it's incredibly important that people perceive and know that system to be as equitable and as robust as it possibly can be. And I think if this council made any other decision other than what is on the table today, it would not be providing its citizens with the best and most robust process that we can provide them with. So I do wholeheartedly endorse this, and looks like going to happen, which is great.
Further speakers, Councillor Wilson.
Well, just on a lighter note, I think it gives people choice, and I'm one who had a name relatively early in the alphabet, and I chose to marry someone with a surname right at the end. I like having that choice, and I think it's terrible for any of us who are politically minded early in our lives when we got married not to worry about those things, but it is nice that I'm going to be treated fairly for making that choice.
Thank you. Further discussion. All right, I don't think there's, I'm going to put it, I don't think there's any need for me to make any further comments. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Against? Carried. And can I just say I've had a text from one Aaron Aardvark who says he's no longer standing in the elections. Right, on to 24, Local Government New Zealand Conference and Annual General Meeting, change of delegate. This is a pretty straightforward matter. Any questions regarding this?
Second.
It's been moved, Councillor Wilson, second to Councillor McTavish. Councillor Butcher.
I was just actually going to ask, I haven't asked Councillor McTavish about this, but I was wondering if Councillor McTavish would like to go to this conference instead of Councillor Noon, because, you know, as a young person who's going to be involved with council for hopefully quite a lot longer, it would be quite good for her to have the experience of being involved in a meeting like this. I'm sorry I haven't asked the rest of the committee this.
I'm open for you to move something,
Well,
can I just explain the reasoning that led into this? Councillor Brown informed me that he is no longer able to attend. He pointed out that the agenda of the conference contained quite a number of items relating to transportation. It was felt that, given that being the case, that Councillor Noon would be an appropriate delegate, and I believe that he's right. I asked Councillor Noon and he agreed. So I'm happy for you to move something as an alternative or in addition if you wish, but can I suggest that you really ought to have, I don't know if you've discussed it with Councillor McTavish.
No, that's okay.
You don't? Okay. Well, it's a move. All right. Any further questions? Would someone like to move this? Councillor Wilson. Oh, you have. Wilson, McTavish. Any further discussion? I'll put it. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Against? Carried. Item 25. This is any questions on this now? Who would be answering? Oh well. Councillor McTavish, do you have a question?
Yeah, well, I guess this is it's possibly outside of the scope of what I should be asking, so you can rule this out of order if you like, if you wish it. But it just struck me reading this paper, the fact that it's currently a council-controlled organisation may have some impact on its ability or otherwise to operate as we might like a trust fund to operate, in terms of if we were to move the Heritage Fund into something that others could contribute to, and I think, you know, looking at the way that we're moving with heritage in the city, we may like to investigate that in the future. I just wondered whether the current way that it's set up as a council-controlled organisation is in fact the best mechanism that we might have in place for a heritage fund, and whether in the context of the thinking around this report, whether or not any of that had been considered. But it probably hasn't, and it's possibly a little bit outside of the gambit of this report.
I think you're probably right on both counts. I think there's nothing to stop us from considering that, but in the context of this, I think it would be unwise to try and to debate that now in the absence of any background information. So.
Well, I guess the thinking that I had behind it was our staff looking at a restructure of the fund in that way, or would it be useful for a subsequential motion to this report to request that work be done?
Dr. Hazelton, since fortuitously discovered you at the back of the room, you may be the one person in council who has the ability to respond to that. Do you wish to, or do you have any comment to make about?
I don't know what the report's about, so.
That's fine. I can raise it out of the relevant committee.
We can come back to that.
Yeah.
That's fine.
If I could
make the observation, this is really just about making an arrangement which suits the auditors. It doesn't change the underlying status, if you like. It does not have an effect on what you may choose to do. It just makes life easier with the auditors the next 12 months.
Thank you. Councillor Wilson.
I'll move, sir, that the council grant an exemption under Section 7 of the Local Government Act 2002 to the Dunedin Heritage Fund, as in they are not being used for any trading. More or less, the recommendation, but not quite.
Yep. Further, Councillor Butcher.
Oh, I was going to second.
Oh, you're moving.
I'll move it, yes, it's like a change.
Sorry. You a bit quickly for me and I didn't quite pick that up. Councillor Wilson, second Councillor Butcher. Any further discussion? I'm going to put it. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Against? Okay. Now I'm going to, well, that's the end of the public part of the agenda. I'm going to move from the chair that the public be excluded from the following parts of the proceedings of the meeting, namely items 26 and 29 for the reasons on the order paper. Second to Councillor Staines. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Against? Carried. And we'll take a 5-minute recess while we